Hallo und herzlich willkommen zu einem weiteren Video von Gaming Scharf hier auf unserem YouTube-Channel Scharf und Scharf im Bereich Guild Wars Infos sind wir wieder hier und zwar in unserer Rubrik der Klassen, denn es gab ja von ArenaNet die erste Vorstellung von drei neuen Elite-Spezialisierungen, die wir mit Vision of Eternity bekommen, dem neuen DLC, und zwar war das Mesmer, Wächter und Wylde. Dazu gab es auch einen Twitch-Stream, auf dem wir im Nachhinein reagiert haben und ich habe für euch ja auf YouTube, damit ihr davon natürlich auch noch was habt, alle drei Klassen einmal geteilt und da die jeweilige Reaction dazu, was sie so da erzählt haben und gezeigt haben, einmal in den jeweiligen Videos verpackt. Anfangen tun wir mit dem Mesmer, dem Troubadour, oder wie sich das anschimpft. Ich hätte es als einfachshalber schöner gehabt, wenn sie einfach Bade gesagt hätten. Das wäre total einfach gewesen. Der geht von seiner Klon-Thematik wieder mal weg. Beim letzten Mal hatten wir das ja schon so, dass er ja die Klone zu diesen Messern gemacht hat, zu diesen Dolchen, die man dann wegschießen konnte. Jetzt geht er in den nächsten Schritt. Er macht daraus Musikinstrumente sogar. Also kriegt an sich richtig andere Waffen über die F-Fähigkeiten, die quasi gesehen unterschiedlich buffen und sich buffen können. Also er wirkt etwas komplex, durch das er jetzt dann noch mehr Fähigkeiten hat, die er aktivieren kann. Muss man sehen, wie es sich spielt. Dass das Ganze wirkte für mich von den dreien auch der sehr intensiv sich was zu ausgedacht wurde gegenüber den anderen beiden. Storytechnisch Hintergrund von ihm ist, bezieht er sich auf die Sylvaris, von wegen, dass die ja nach Jahren, dafür, dass die jetzt schon 36 nach ihrem Erwachen sind, also 36 Jahre ist unsere Case jetzt alt. Das heißt, sie kommt bald in die Midlife-Crisis mit 40. Pubertätssachen haben wir bei ihr ja schon durch. Und die quasi gesehen dann über Geschichten, Dichte, Gesang oder halt darüber erzählen, was sie erlebt haben. Und das ist die Symbolik hinter dieser Klasse, die wir jetzt hier kriegen. Und dementsprechend wünsche ich euch hier schon mal viel Spaß mit diesem Video.
All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first of, I guess, 3 Elite Specialization preview streams for Visions of Eternity. I'm Cal Cohen, joined by Taylor Brooks.
Hello.
Some nicknames that no one really cares about.
Ich bin echt erstaunt, dass diesmal nicht Ruby Bayer. Man hört sie? Okay. That's cool.
Going pretty well, you know, have 3 super cool Elite Specs to show off to everyone.
Erst ein Stück laut.
You know, display what we've been working on the past bit of time.
I hope you have water ready to go, because
I do.
For anyone, a bit of history.
Also interessant, dass Ruby Bayer nicht bei ist und das einleitet, was normalerweise eigentlich ihr Job ist als Community-Ding. Community-Hauptmanagerin, also interessant. Sehr ungewöhnlich. Ja, Cohen, wir wissen, dass du der Wassersäufer bist.
But we are going to kick things off today with the Troubadour, Luminary, and the Gale Shot. Obviously, you know, we had a little teaser video earlier this week. We had a bit of an intro blog that went over some of the high-level ideas, high-level mechanics, some of the lore as well. Today we're going to be covering everything about all the specs. You're going to see all the skills. You're going to see all the traits. You're going to have developers explain some of the thought processes behind those skills and traits. And yeah, we're going to do this the next few weeks until we've covered all 9 Elite specs, setting up for the beta event where you guys are going to be able to get your hands on these. All 9 specs will be playable.
Ja, Beta-Event, Ende August soll das sein.
Make sure there's plenty of time to check everything out, try everything out.
Und wir fragen, ob das noch reicht, um Anpassungen zu machen.
The big thing to keep in mind here, and even as we're talking and showing stuff on stream, is that these are still getting ready for beta. There's a lot of balance work we're still being done internally ahead of the beta, so some numbers might look a little weird, a little too low, a little too high. That's totally expected at this point. Even for the beta, we're not going to land perfectly. We've obviously seen some pretty crazy numbers on betas for some of the weapons in the past, elite specs in the past. The big goal is that we're going to get everything in a playable state players get all your hands on it, give us a ton of feedback, and we're going to have time to action a lot of those important pieces before the official launch of the expansion. Anything you want to add, Taylor, before we just hop right in?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure as with all the betas, like we said, all the art, audio,
So
and
lautes
balance,
Headset ist so
so
krass,
in
ey.
flux. All the
Gegenüber
numbers you
Karl.
see here probably will be the numbers that make it to when the beta happens. So everything you see here, just focusing on the effects. We have a lot of cool art. So again,
Taylor is loud. Let me see if I can turn Taylor down a little bit. Real quick.
Ja, Timo, auf alle Fälle war der das, ey.
I'm gonna be
Alter.
yapping a lot. So.
Okay, let's just do some quick audio checks because we did an audio check, but not, I guess, the best audio check. Taylor listened to himself talk and said, "Yeah, that's a good audio level." Let's turn Taylor down a little bit.
gut, wir sind nicht die Einzigen, denen es aufwundert, dass
Can you
der so
say some
laut
words,
ist.
Taylor, while I read the chat. See if anyone.
Yeah, I can do some improv speaking. I'm totally good at that. Is this better, guys? Please say yes. Okay, people are actually saying it's better.
Okay, let's jump in to the game.
Oh, wir hören Geräusche. Ah,
Things off with
Fraktal.
the,
Ui.
almost said the wrong.
Gucken, okay, man sieht alles.
We're starting with the Troubadour.
The Troubadour.
What do we?
Oh, er hat aktuell den Stab in der Hand. Okay, also das ist typische Stabfähigkeiten. Also wir haben wirklich neue Fähigkeiten. Es sind nicht alle ausgerüstet. Die neuen ist noch eine typische. Das ist ein Klon machen. Aber die anderen sind definitiv neue Sachen, die wir hier haben. Und das, wie es auch im Blogpost stand, dass die Musikinstrumente die Schmetterfähigkeiten ersetzen. Das habe ich auch soweit gelesen gehabt.
I'm going on here, Taylor.
So the Troubadour is going to be the elite spec for Mesmer in Vision's Paternity. And this kind of archetype has had a long history in this game. You know, starting even from when Mesmer was initially revealed, been asked for a long time. So it's kind of like one of the reasons we wanted to go with it is it's fan favorite. Wanted to fully see it realized in game. And now talking about the Troubadour,
Keine
it's going to
Vorbereitung,
be
aber
a
ganz schwer
more
unterschrauben.
support-focused archetype, but it is going to have offensive capabilities and be definitely able to be played in solo play and even more offensive roles, maybe as a DPS and instance play or like competitive modes. But that support role is kind of like what we're super focusing on. Going to see a lot of it throughout the kit. Its gameplay loop is going to be slightly different from core Mesmer's. You know, core Mesmer has clones where for the Troubadour we win with notes. Notes are, there's no in-game representation of them like clones. It's going to be like blades.
Also man sieht schon mal, dass es eine Laute ist, es ist eine Flöte, eine Trommel und die Harfe. Und das letzte soll ja irgendwie dieses Orchester ja sein. Aber die Trommel, die hatte ich bisher nämlich noch nicht gesehen.
Versus an energy system. And then you're going to use those notes to fuel your instruments. And then when you use an instrument, it'll kind of float behind you, giving you a persistent effect. And then you're going to want to build up multiple instruments, and then at the end of your gameplay loop, you're going to press crescendo. It's kind of a big time skill with some pretty decent effects. So I think talking about the support role and why we also wanted it, you know, with Secrets of the Obscure, we released the rifle for Mesmer, which Mesmer into trying to be traditional support that can like fully heal its allies and things from the role. But with the specs that released then, the only one that really made sense was Chronomancer, kind of de facto support, so we put a lot of utility in Mesmer's kit and put things on skills that weren't necessarily richly support skills. Chronomancer has a history of being a support, but it's always been kind of a support, or providing a lot of utility value.
Er ist so laut, jetzt ist sein nicht so gut mehr. Er redet so viel, das Mikro ist erschöpft.
Let me see for a second. Oh, right, that is correct.
Is your mic on the incorrect?
Does that sound better?
Now I need to turn you up, I'm pretty sure. That sounds a lot better.
Amazing Discord quality.
Alright, let me turn Taylor back up.
Yay!
Ja, eine normale Stimme,
Volume.
super. Interessant, dass die Fähigkeiten, das sind ja zwei menschliche Figuren und dass das hier zwei Schar sind bei der Heilung und der 7.
Alright, we have a lot more talking to go, so I'm glad that's...
Kann natürlich alles Platzhalter noch sein.
Okay, we are so back. You want to get that spiel again, Taylor? Tell me about the first tell me about the Troubadour.
The Troubadour. Let's see, talked about how its gameplay loop's going to be a bit longer and have a more sustained presence in normal Mesmer. And then Chronomancer was kind of the de facto support. We're going to be kind of shifting where some things live onto the Troubadour. We'll get into that a bit more later, so that Chronomancer can kind of regain its old identity, and Troubadour can kind of step in, so a lot of the ways it supports allies are more intentional and can hopefully lead to better gameplay.
Golems fragen sich auch, greif uns doch endlich mal
But then
an.
the first thing, you know, we can zoom in, I think, you know, looking at the UI is the first thing you'll notice. You know, talked about notes, they're going to fill up at the bottom bar there. Again, there are no clones. Some of the reasons, we had multiple reasons for doing this. The first one was just that we wanted kind of people to focus more on keeping their instruments up.
Gut, dass wir keine Klone haben, das haben wir beim Virtuosen ja auch schon. Dass die Klonen nur über die Fähigkeiten mitkommen.
Some game modes like Rovy World, when it gets larger scale, we want support Mesmer to definitely function, and we saw that when you're playing a Chronomancer that has clones, a lot of the time you can't depend on getting a high shatter count. So we want to make sure that this spec feels good to play and you're not fighting your mechanic, and it just does what you want. But going from the notes, like I said, they fuel the instruments. It's going to be a bit different from normal shatters. Normal shatters, they basically scale however many clones you have. Like if you do a mind rack with all 3 clones, it's going to do a lot more damage than 1. Instruments are going to be a bit different. When you play an instrument, it's going to be an initial effect, and this initial effect is constant. It's going to be the same whether you have 0 notes or 3 notes.
Ich kann keine Noten lesen.
And what's going to be different is that when you use it, the instrument will kind of float in the background, giving those bonuses like I talked about, and the duration
Dreimal Damage mit 1000, okay. Healing.
So you want to build up notes so that your loot is there for longer. And basically more notes
Schick auf alle Fälle.
So that you have bigger windows to do things like strike the crescendo or use some of the utilities that we'll get into.
Yeah, so notably, it still counts to 3. They're just in groups of 2 notes. So you get 3, still have a total of 3 here.
Right.
But there are 6 things that are filled. You know.
I believe the notes are actually on a scale and do play a little tune. If those who are musically inclined want to look into that, then that would be pretty cool. But you know,
okay.
The note, it's three notes, like 3 clones. We wanted that kind of be similar to normal Mesmer.
All right. Should we hop into some skills?
Yeah. Yes, we can look at the skills.
Hauptsache noch mehr irgendwelche Sachen, die wir klicken, aktivieren oder sonstiges können.
First one, you're gonna whip out the loot and do 3 waves. All the instruments are kind of replacements, like normal shatters. Like so, this one's gonna be the mind drag. It's gonna be the more damaging one. You know, when you do it, if you have no target, these waves will just go out in front of you. But you can.
Okay, dadurch laden die sich jetzt natürlich nicht auf.
Weil
du sie die ganze Zeit benutzen kannst wie ein weiteres Waffenset. Das ist ja krass.
So pretty simple skill. It's going to be the one you're pressing often. And then we can move on to the flute.
Hopefully I am going to be doing a lot of cheating on this stream, so no cooldowns.
Wir besiegen den Gegner, indem wir einfach ein Musical machen. Bis später, Timo.
Yeah, tell me about the flute.
The flute, that's going to be kind of your cry of frustration equivalent. You're going to fluster your enemies with a note from your flute. It's going to do a wave in front of you, confusing people. And it's also going to have a sweet spot in the middle where it's like, you know, middle of the hitbox. If you hit them, you're also going to get a short daze, kind of interrupt. We wanted to give the skill a bit more utility. A lot of the time, the cry of frustration equivalents aren't useful in a lot of the builds. So I wanted to give it something a little extra that, you know, even supports when you use it.
Dauert kein halbes Jahr, dann wird das genervt.
So it should be a pretty good skill. Then we can move on to the drum, the deafening drums. This is going to be your diversion, the CC skill.
Ah, okay.
Slam the drum
long way, Dings mit Benommenheit.
And the wave will have kind of scaling effects based on how close the enemy was.
Ja,
from you.
Stefan, das brauchst du
So you wanna be
fürs
pretty
Lab.
close
Du
when you
tust
land
einfach
the
die Leute
strongest effect,
C10 mit deiner
at
Trommel.
close range, you're going to stun them, and a bit farther out, it's going to lessen into a daze, and at the last range, that daze is going to taper off into just a lesser
Boah,
range.
der wird denn... Also ich sehe jetzt schon, dass der im PvP eventuell böse wird.
Value out of this kit that, you know, all Mesmers have, and then we can move on to the harp. So the harp
hier,
is
war
going
klar.
to be, the harmonious harp is going to be your healing skill. The first thing you can notice is that it does not just give distortion baseline. I think Cal has,
I have some traits on.
Cal has a trait on, we'll get to that, but this skill baseline doesn't provide distortion. We wanted this spec to, instead of having a high cooldown invuln like a lot of Mesmers have, we wanted to do it lower cooldown, more sustain that you see from a lot of supports. So it's going to, you know, when you use it, do a burst healing, and then over time just do some more pulse healing. This is going to, again, low cooldown, healing your allies, what you want to do on more traditional healing support. And so
There's
all
one
of
more
those
skill
skills,
here.
yes.
Or are you going to say
you
something
will
else?
notice-
You going to say something else?
No. You will notice that these all are the instruments, and then the fifth skill, the F5, is a bit different. This is the crescendo that we've been talking about. So when you use the crescendo, you're going to kind of have a warm-up where you're going to conduct all your instruments to kind of strike a chord at once and release a wave of energy. It's going to deal damage to enemies and also grant your allies barrier. And the effect of this will scale based on how many instruments you have. So it's going to get, right now, 25% better for all of the effects based on how many instruments. So if you have all 4 instruments up, it can potentially get double the effect of this.
Okay.
And it's going to get additional effects based on traits. You can see that it's going to also give Might and Fury based on a trait per instrument you have up. And, you know, ends up being a pretty flexible skill. That's kind of like your bigger payoff. But yeah, that kind of comprises the core of the profession loop. Again, building up the notes, using your instruments. I think you can probably aim to have 2 or 3 instruments up with like a correct rotation. You know, 4 if you're really going for it.
Also richtig intensiv, dass du natürlich die Tasten drückst. Das ist nicht so einfach so, ich zerschmetter ständig, wie ich Bock habe. Nee. Das ist wie ein Skillbaum, also ähnlich wie mit den Folianten des Wächters, nur dass sich dann halt deine 1 bis 5 nicht ändern.
All your instruments at once to get that strong value immediately, but then you do lose out on having those instruments be up for the longer period of time. As we're going to see from the traits, there are bonuses that just come with these instruments being behind you. So we can go into the utilities next, before we go into the traits.
Also,
So the
ich sag mal
utility type
so,
for this,
wirkt trotzdem
so
danach,
we've
dass es
got the
nicht gravierend
tails.
einfach ist zu
They're
spielen.
going to be kind of vocal
Self-healing,
things, just like
all-healing,
shouts, where
okay.
you like say a message when you use them. And these tails are all based
Story
on
of Owen,
legends,
für die
yeah.
Heilung, finde ich cool.
They're specifically focused more on like lore and
Ah,
heroes
das ist
you-
Drache,
you
okay.
know
Jetzt
from
sieht man auch,
Guild
dass es ein
Wars 2,
Drachenkopf
rather
ist.
than like, you know, Revenant has like Guild Wars 1 things. But this game, you know, it's been around for a long time. So we're going to talk about the heroes that you all know and have played with as your adventures through the game. So as I said, they're kind of like vocal skills, just like shouts. When you use them, there's going to be an additional effect.
Scheint aber auch schon gebufft zu werden, wie das da stand, wenn je mehr Instrumente du hast, also spielst.
Almorra Soulkeeper. It's going to grant offensive boons to your allies. And then you can see each of them have a performance bonus,
Ah, da,
which
deswegen
kind of
Schar,
a little
Legende
hook.
auf Almorra, okay.
And basically, all the utility skills
Macht,
correspond
Wut
to
und
an instrument,
Schnelligkeit.
and they get stronger while that instrument's playing. So Almorra
Tatendrang.
is corresponding to the lute. So if you use it while the lute is playing, you'll grant some extra notes to yourself, so you can get some other instruments playing. And then we can go into the other ones. You know, next we have the Honorable Rogue, which is going to be Dougal Keane, the protagonist from the well-known, amazing Ghosts of Ascalon book, that I'm sure everyone is aware of. He's a super cool character. But this one,
Aus
he
dem
is a thief, a rogue.
Ascalon-Buch, gut,
You know,
deswegen
Garen
sagte
gets
mir der
to make
Kane
everyone
auf
faster,
Anhieb
remove
nix.
conditions, and also grant endurance, and he corresponds to the drum, so if that's playing, you can also give some super speed to your allies. And then the last one, or not the last one, the next
more.
supportive one
Turn.
is going to be the Tale of the Valiant Marshal. It is
Hopefully
going to
people
be
recognize this character.
your defensive shout based on Traherne, another amazing character. It's going to give your allies protection, resistance, break, stun, you know, pretty powerful defensive effects. And if you have the heart playing as well, it's also going to give your allies barrier. And then the last skill is actually going to be an offensive ability. It's going to be the Tale of the Tortured Mastermind with another person that, you know, we talked about this in the blog.
Ich weiß nicht, ob ich über Scarlet singen will oder Gedichte schreiben.
Targeted shout. You're going to almost mock your enemies viciously, one might say. Kind of targeting
Also
on
nicht
them,
nur so
summoning those
heftig
laughing
über die,
clockwork nightheads on your
also nicht nur so heftig über die F-Fähigkeit, auch die darüber, was man jetzt singt, die sind auch nicht ohne. Also, puh. Also momentan wirkt der, gut, kann natürlich auch für einen Stream sein, aber momentan wirkt er extrem mächtig, aber wirklich, finde ich, gerade schwer zu spielen. Wenn du bedenkst, wenn man das Orchester plus die Noten hier oben, die man ja scheinbar auch noch bestimmen und Effekte machen, ja, weit nicht so könnte heftig, schwierig sein.
Pulse 4 times. The first pulse will leave them weakened, then you'll leave them vulnerable, then it will strip wounds, and then the last one will
Wundbarkeit, Schwäche und Pein.
So when you have that active, it's gonna
aber nur wegen den mehr Instrumenten.
Also do some extra defiance damage for, you know, PvE situations. And, you know, something about I'm hoping you're hearing them as Cal's playing, but when you play these
das ersetzt nicht, das kommt noch zusätzlich drauf.
Each of them have about 4 that'll play in order, so as you fight with them and use them, it'll like kind of, you'll hear a poem that your character will say, and I'm sure, you know, it'll be on the wiki that everyone correlates, but, you know, pretty cool narrative work from the team, and, you know, nice little stories you get to hear about these characters that you've, you know, played through in the game. We can also go to the heal, you know, Oreen, we showed that one off. It's going to be
Karl spielt diesmal nur, damit er nicht so viel trinken muss.
When you use it, and its performance bonus, it's going to, instead of corresponding to a specific instrument, it's just going to care about how many instruments you have up. And so when you use it, if you have 2 or more instruments, you're going to apply this Scion for Freeze buff to your allies. That's going to increase the incoming healing that they get from all sources, including the heal. So, you know, definitely want to make sure you have 2 instruments up before you use the skill to get like pretty good value. And then we can move to the elite skill, which I'm sure a lot of people have heard about already. This is the Tale of the August Queen, based around Queen Jenna's protection.
Jenna, oh my god.
You know, divinity's reach.
Jenna kriegt eine Ballade.
And its effects based, it's going to give distortion and chaos aura to allies. And distortion share to allies has a storied history in our game, and we are aware of its potential. But we also think that distortion share is probably a peak power fantasy for support Mesmer. And we definitely wanted to try it again in the spec that's focused around it. And we're hoping that putting it on an elite skill, where it has an adjustable duration, a cooldown, and some additional effects we can also weigh against its power, will leave it in a state that it is, you know, possible to be in our game. We definitely don't want this to be how it is before, where it's very oppressive, but we do think that, you know, trying it out and giving it an opportunity to
Also wirkt wie beim Waldläufer, wenn du da jeweilige Tier hast, wenn du das bei den Fähigkeiten aktivierst. Nur halt, dass dem kleine Balladen sind über die jeweiligen
Maybe it does the classic, you know, goes to blur and then blur is too strong, but you know, this is all, you know, betas are meant for testing, and again, this is something that we really want to do the super cool thing, and so we're going to try the super cool thing, and if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out.
I think there's definitely going to be a lot of things like that we'll see throughout a lot of these elite specializations, where there are, I guess, some aggressive ideas or some very wild ideas, you might say, and not all of them are going to work, but we think that's what betas are for, trying out cool stuff. And sometimes it'll work, sometimes it won't, and we're going to fix the things that don't work. So if AoE distortion on, you know, the elite skill here is going to break the game, it will likely go away.
Yep. And we can also see that it has a performance bonus of its own that's also, I think, pretty strong. When you use this skill, you're going to bring up all your instruments for a duration. Baseline pretty short, just 3 seconds, but that duration is going to scale based on how many instruments you had before. So if you use it when you have no instruments up, just they'll all come up for 3 seconds, but say you had 2 instruments up and then you use it, they'll all come up for 9 seconds. So giving you value when you use it, even if you had a lot of instruments up. This is another way to use it to get like a quick crescendo, get all your instruments up for, you know, those buffs that they give. To kind of also balance out that, you know, distortion can be powerful, but this can also be another powerful effect that you can use for a different reason.
Perfect for me, who just wants to press all my shatters and then press the Elite, get maximum duration.
So those cover all the utilities, so we can now move into the traits, that I'm sure everyone's just so excited to see.
Alright, and I'll do one last hover over of everything before we swap to the next spec, so I'll let you guys know when to get your print screen buttons ready for all those screenshots if you haven't been keeping up already. We'll put some random traits on so it doesn't do the flashing thing that everyone really loved the last time we did Elite Spec previews. Alright, where should we start? Minor traits?
Yep, minor traits. So I mean, the very first one is just going to be the basic minor trait that just gives you access to everything, doesn't really do anything, as it just explains what...
Was auf die Laute, okay.
You know, the Troubadour wants to do, but then we can move to the master minor, which is going to be harmonize. This is going to be pretty simple. You're kind of already saw in the tooltip.
Okay,
it's going to cause your instruments to increase outgoing damage and healing. It's going to be the first kind of minor bonus for just having those instruments up. You just get stronger. Then we can move to the Grandmaster minor, symphonic resonance. This again you saw from the tooltip. Crescendo grants effective
schön nochmal
Macht
und Wut drauf.
This can again scale the Might and Fury based on how many instruments, kind of just playing into what you want to do with Crescendo. Then both the Adept and the Master tier kind of have themes to them. They're going to have 2 instrument traits and then 1 kind of generic value trait. So we can see that if we go into the Adept tier, the first one is going to be Mayhem. Your flute, all the instrument traits will have 2 effects. The first one will kind of augment what the initial effect
okay, gleich 4, 6. Die lieben momentan Pein bei ArenaNet.
So we see Mayhem, and it causes your flute to additionally apply Torment, make that condition burst just a bit better. And then while the flute is playing behind yourself, you'll heal yourself when you apply Condition or Torment. This trait is aimed more to like open world gameplay. If you want to be more of a condition duelist competitive mode, just giving you a bit more sustain and damage for playing a more condition, Torment, Confusion, Bard, or Troubadour.
So, also ich mache Konfusion,
Then we get
dafür
into the
Pein
middle
beim
traits,
Gegner machen, aber ich kriege
where
Heilung.
we have Hold
Okay.
the Note. Crescendo extends the duration of boons to nearby allies. Boon extension is another core Mesmer fantasy that we have before on Signet of Inspiration, but now we're having it on this trait where you have to choose between some of the other effects. Again, powerful, making Crescendo even more powerful. I would say these specs did have in development names that, you know, even as developers we have to work to say the correct terms. And we get to the bottom trait where we have Syncopate. This is going to be the drum trait. When you play the drum after a delay, it'll release a quick wave where you'll also do a shorter daze, just additional CC on top of your skill, and give you a passive that when the drum is playing, you'll deal additional damage to enemies you disable. And so this is kind of an effect that we see on traits like Bunker Down or Lightning Rod from other from other specializations in the game. This,
Ich bin jetzt voll ausgerüstet mit Stab und Pistolen und Schwert und sowas, aber ich habe gleichzeitig noch 5 Musikinstrumente mit.
Moving on to the Master tier, we have the first one is the Loot trait, Shredding. This augment more damage. It'll cause your loot to deal more damage per wave. So the first wave will deal normal damage, second wave will deal 25% more damage, and then the last wave will deal 50% more damage. So making sure you really want to hit those, especially at the later ones.
Das ist einfach die F1 zu buffen, so Klassiker.
Passive, it's just going to give you a pretty good big damage increase while the loot is playing. So this will be a DPS spec. We'll want this trait compared to the others in this tier. It's going to be pretty important to keep your loot playing as a pretty big damage modifier. Then we can move to Raconteur. This is again the generic trait. It's going to be, you know, the trait that affects your elite spec utilities. This one will augment the tails. When you use a tail, it'll grant you a
Heal
note
and
and
delete
then also
tails,
recharge the
all
corresponding instrument.
instruments.
So like
Ah,
if
okay,
you
das
use
ist dann
Almorra,
auch
it'll recharge the
darauf
flute.
auch ein
Use
Buff.
Dougal one, it'll recharge the drums. And it'll also give you a lesser recharge for the heal and elite. Since we don't have a really specific instrument, it's going to recharge all of them, but just for a lesser amount. Then lastly, we can move on to Love Song. This trait is going to affect the harp. Kind of did what you saw before, where it causes the harp to get you distortion. So, you know, the Troubadour doesn't have distortion baseline, but this trait is kind of an option for the more supportive builds that want it.
Ach, das ist das, was vorhin anhatte, was umgestellt hat.
And then PvE
Da buffst
is
du die
also
Harfe
where you're
mit.
going to be applying some alacrity and regen in all game mode, or regen in all game modes. PvE will also give alacrity, kind of getting
Wie viel Tatendrang wir kriegen, was wir beim Chrono größtenteils alles rausgeschmissen haben.
with your harp. Then we can move on to the Grandmaster trait.
You want to start in the middle though. The Grandmasters, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So the first one, just call and response, we already talked about in the blog post. When you use an instrument at the note threshold, you're going to create an after image that will play the same instrument after a delay. After image here basically means phantasm that's not a phantasm. It'll appear in the world, but it won't be targetable, and it won't give you a note when it goes away. We didn't want you to get a free note when you're already, requiring notes for this. So that's why we kind of created this new type of illusion. But as you can see, with
Ah, die Klone füllen, kannst du dann damit die Noten auffüllen. Verstehe.
Play the loop again, so it can double the CC from your drum. It can double the healing from your harp. It can also, just get you more damage. So pretty versatile trait. We can move on to the bottom trait, Altered Chord. This trait's going to focus around
Ich möchte ein altes Volkslied haben. Das möchte ich jetzt spielen, werter Klon. Ich tue ein Volksinstrument klonen für Volksmusik.
Right before you press crescendo. So crescendo's effects are going to be augmented based on the instrument you played last. So kind of
Okay, der typische, dass die noch einen Zusatzeffekt kriegen.
Possible to get more crescendos out, but it also wants you to make sure that you know when you're about to crescendo, so you can keep an instrument.
Auf Konversion bei der Flöte, ey.
You kind of varied utility from this. You can get more healing, more CC. Just depends on how you want to play. And lastly, we can go to the top Grandmaster, which is Fortissimo. This one's kind of gonna try and alter how you use crescendo in general. The first effect it has is going to give you an attribute bonus for having your instruments up, and this stacks. So if you have 2 instruments, it'll be 10%. If you have all 4, 20%. That's a pretty big number, and it's going to cause crescendo when you use it to get you a note per second for a duration. So right now it'll give you 6 notes pretty rapidly. So instead of, normally you want to use crescendo as your finisher, you want to use it as your opener here. So you're going to crescendo, then it's going to give you a lot of notes, you're going to get your instruments. So this gives you a lot of note generation, so you can have, have the possibility of having 3 or 4 instruments up for a high duration to get value out of that attribute increase.
Definitely set up the elite pretty well as well.
I think that covers it for the traits. I mentioned before talking about Troubadour and Chronomancer.
So, bei dem sind jetzt 38 Minuten rum. Gut durch das Sound einstellen, aber wir sind immer noch bei dem ersten.
Traits can show off like an example of that is bountiful.
Also halbe Stunde pro passt nicht ganz.
Stability was put on the distortion slot, and it was pretty powerful, especially with Chronomancer's ability to double that and things being instant cast. So we're shifting around the bonuses back a little, putting regen back on the
gut, klar, dann mussten ja die Shutterfähigkeiten dann anpassen in den Skillbäumen.
To kind of give Troubadour better access to that and have specific things that the Troubadour can be better at than Chronomancer, and in turn, hopefully going back in Chronomancer and strengthening up its identity that we had to, take a bit.
Wirkt nach einem heftigen Supporter.
Remove a bit of it when we added support things.
Also plus Schaden, also du kannst schön Schaden mit dem machen, kannst aber auch gut supporten, wie das jetzt schon wirkt damit.
More things in Troubadour's kit so that Chronomancer can be what it wants to be again.
And the goal
again,
is that Chrono will still be viable as a support build, right?
Yes, very
it
much so.
Won't be able to do all the things that it is able to do.
Yeah. That kind of covers it for the.
Anything else?
I think hover over all those traits, make sure people got screenshots.
Get ready for your screenshots. We'll do all the traits and then all the skills. Surely Taylor will fill the air as I hover over these things with his new and improved microphone.
No, I just need more water.
Probably need more water.
Yep.
Ja, Skill, so Fertigkeiten suchen. So sitze ich manchmal auch da.
What's your
Meinst du,
favorite
möchte ich jetzt
skill
einstellen?
in this profession?
I think my favorite part of the profession is definitely crescendo. I really like the warm-up, the spotlight effect. I think the VFX team was like, they did a really good job on that, you know, highlight that even more. First thought, I just couldn't stop using the skill. But I think all the instruments, you know, kind of the concept of being, you know, a one-person band, you know, you're a Mesmer taking your illusions to have all your instruments playing behind you instead of like beating other people, so you can be your own concert, be your own be your own conductor. That's kind of the initial idea that went behind all of these skills.
We're almost done. Could probably go way faster. You know the chat is all on top of these screenshots?
Yeah.
Just give them like 1 pixel and go back in the pod. Valiant Marshall. Who's the last one?
And again, gonna plug the book Ghosts of Ascalon, Dougal Keane. If you don't know who that is, very good book. Release. I have my own copy. Cal has his own.
Ja, ich habe noch
copy.
das gelesen. Ich habe die Bücher ja
You know,
nicht
we're
gelesen.
such lore heads.
Okay, ist also ein Charakter daraus.
Taylor's definitely
Deswegen
more of a
sagte der
warrior
mir
guy,
auch nichts.
but,
Oder im Blogpost da ich so, hey, wer soll denn der Typ sein?
Alright, I think that's everything. So we can move on. I'm going to switch back to this screen while I get set up on the next character. We'll be showing off Luminary next.
Okay, während er in den nächsten Charakter geht, mein lieben Schäfchen, holen wir uns noch mal einen Kaffee. Das war auf alle Fälle jetzt schon mal sehr interessant. Wie gesagt, er wirkt schwer, finde ich. Durch die Kombination, dass du mit den Instrumenten auch darauf reagieren musst. Puh. Da kannst du mal ordentlich mehr auf Masse drücken an Fähigkeiten als sonst. Vor allem, weil du ja die oben die Instrumente ja relativ viel nutzen kannst. Weil die ja keinen Cooldown haben wie sonst die Schmetterer-Fähigkeiten. Wirkt auch sehr, sehr mächtig. Auch scheinbar im Support-Bereich, je nachdem wie du ihn einstellst. Ich würde fast sagen, bei dem dauert es nicht lange, bis er einen Nerf kriegt, weil er zu heftig ist. Sollte man auf alle Fälle schon mal, wenn man es so sieht, nicht unterschätzen, auch im PvP nicht. Aber wie gesagt, muss man gucken, wie es sich spielt. Ich persönlich wüsste jetzt keinen meiner Mesmer-Charaktere, der mit ihm arbeiten könnte. Also wo ich sagen würde, oh, der wird das jetzt. Das ist so ein Eigencharakterstil, diese Figur, wenn man den spielen will. Also er passt zu keinem meiner beiden Mesmer definitiv nicht. Also da bräuchte ich einen eigenen Charakter, der dann das macht. Aber da wüsste ich jetzt speziell auch nicht so gravierend, was ich da machen wollen würde. Ansonsten, wie gesagt, sieht schon mal sehr interessant aus. Und nun befinden wir uns am Ende unseres kleinen schnuckligen Videos. Denkt dran, wenn euch das Video gefallen hat, dann Daumen nach oben. Wenn euch weitere Videos auf unserem Kanal interessieren, dann abonnieren und das Bimmelglöckchen nicht vergessen, damit ihr immer das Neueste vom Neuesten nicht verpasst, was wir auf unserem kleinen Channel hier hochladen. Besucht uns auch auf unseren anderen Social Media Plattformen. Im Bereich Guild Wars 2 ist das Twitter, X und Facebook. Auf Twitter tue ich auch meine Streaming-Zeiten zusätzlich noch posten. Ansonsten könnt ihr auch gerne mal bei Gamer-Profils vorbeischauen. Social Media von Gamern für Gamer. Auf Instagram findet ihr mich auch oder ihr schaut einfach bei twitch.tv/gamingscharf rum. Da könnt ihr mich live sehen. Ihr könnt mit mir schreiben oder auch zocken, wenn ihr darauf Bock habt. Alles wie üblich in unserer kleinen schnuckligen Videobeschreibung verlinkt. Meine Lieben, macht es gut. Bis bald. Wir sehen uns.